It is great to see all of you in person, and that is what we are talking about today. We're talking about offsites. So just that word, offsites, brings up lots of feelings for folks, especially after most of us have taken a few years off from doing them, attending them, etc. So think just for a moment of the word that comes to your mind when you think offsite. Over the past few years, offsites have been on a roller coaster ride, right? We plan them, we cancel, we plan, we cancel. Are we getting together? Is it virtual? Is it in person? Is it hybrid, partially virtual, partially in person? How are we reconnecting? And these days, do we have the budget to do so? I think I heard somebody say expensive when a word comes to mind for offsites. But people are still craving the ability to reconnect with each other and get together in some way. Because there is something special that happens when we're together with others. There's a special something that happens when we take ourselves and our brains out of that day-to-day and our work and our responsibilities, and we think more broadly about things. I'm Allison McMillan. I am an engineering leadership consultant and a fractional VP of engineering who works with startups that aren't quite ready for full-time VPs but need that perspective and experience on a part-time basis. I am also on the Ruby Central board, and I had a podcast called Parent-Driven Development. Okay, so being that we are talking about offsites, the best thing about offsites is that they are interactive and engaging. So, or at least they should be. So we're going to talk to each other during this session. So if you are not next to or near someone to the extent that you are comfortable, move now so that you can be. All right. We also have a small group, so as I ask these questions, we can also sort of like feel free to move around a little bit. And so I'm going to ask a few questions, and for each question, you'll have about 3 minutes for both of you to share your answer and discuss a little bit. Make sure to introduce yourself first so that you meet a new Ruby friend. So the first question is, share the best offsite that you have ever been to. And if you've never been to a good offsite, you can think about like the best conference that you've been to. I'm going to give you 3 minutes, and I'm going to start the timer now.
Hi, I'm Mike Monroe, founder of Obelisk, a Rails consultancy based in the Boston area. One of the best offsites that we had was we brought our entire team out to a conference in Portland, Oregon. The team was based in Boston, and we went out there to do some bonding and get away from the office for a few days and get away from client work, and really enjoyed the time.
The best part about these questions is you all talking. The worst part is me standing up here awkwardly for multiple minutes as everyone discusses. All right, for those of you who came in late, we're just in pairs or small groups. We're answering a few questions, and you'll have a few minutes for each question to discuss. The next one is, how did it make you feel while you were there? You got 2 minutes for this one. How did it make you feel while you were there?
While we were at the conference, I felt very light. We got away from the office so that the team could bond and not be stuck with thinking through client work on a day-to-day basis. And it allowed us to have some deeper personal discussions and time together outside of the office. And so we spent a lot of the time just talking about more things that are personal to each of us, things going on in our lives, things that we don't always have the opportunity to do deeper discussions at the office around.
The next question, what was the purpose of the offsite? And try to think of something beyond like just to get everyone together. Okay, try to go deeper than that. So what was its purpose? 3 minutes for this one. Go.
The main purpose for the offsite was for bonding. As engineers, we spend our day at the office. We were not remote at the time, and so just a lot of work understanding client requirements for projects that we were all working on. A lot of the team was working on different projects, and for often we wouldn't have the opportunity to have nice conversations that were outside of the work that we're doing. A lot of it was throughout the day focused on what were the things we were trying to get done on a project-by-project basis. And a lot of times the communication was more smaller pockets within the team. And so by getting out of the office and going to a conference, we had the opportunity to kind of bond a little bit more. We went out and hung out together away from the conference as well. And just having the trip, we were located in Boston, the fact that we were able to travel to the other side of the country really got us away from any other distractions.
All right. Okay. Make sure to introduce yourself so that you have another new Ruby friend. And talk about what made that experience so fun and enjoyable. Feel free to share a short story from the experience or anything. Just what made that experience fun and enjoyable. About 3 minutes for this one again. Go.
The trip was very enjoyable because it did have some travel involved. The team did not travel much together. The work itself does not require much business travel. So myself and the team did not have the opportunity to travel much. So the fact that the entire team could travel out to Portland, Oregon and experience a different setting, learn a little bit at a conference and have some time together was just really exciting, and I think everyone enjoyed the time.
All right, got your next question. Everyone ready? What made it draining? 2 minutes for this one. What made it draining?
Although going to the conference was really fun for everyone, it was also had some draining associated with it. Travel was a positive to get out of the office and get everyone on a plane and travel across the country, but it also made it, it's a lot to handle. I think we were all pretty tired at the end, not just from the travel, but being at a conference and learning a lot. You realize after a few days that it really takes a toll on you.
All right. And finally, last question. You might want to take a few seconds to think about this one before you start answering. What made it special? What was something that you walked away from that offsite with that was an unintended consequence? So what made it special? What was something that you walked away from that offsite with that was an unintended consequence?
At that time, what made the event super special was our team was smaller, and we were able to bring the entire team out for the event. Unfortunately, though, an unintended consequence of that is it was so much fun that we decided we wanted to grow the team further. And so we kind of came home and decided to hire some more people. And the downside was that makes it harder to get a larger group of people together. Now that the team is remote, that's also a struggle. Having teams in person makes a lot of things easier. Now that we're remote, there's a lot more activity around trying to do offsites, even in a remote type of situation.
All right. Okay, that is the end of sharing time for the moment, but there'll be a bit more at the end of the session. Obviously, you haven't used the little note cards that are on your seats yet. So offsites, especially for remote teams, but even for folks who are sort of generally co-located, are critical. They're super important. They create connection, they bring alignment, they provide information, and they increase engagement and enjoyment of employees and how they relate to the company and how they relate to other folks on their team. And yes, this can be more difficult to accomplish virtually. Virtually, you need to deal with a whole variety of additional challenges that aren't present in person. So some examples are home interruptions, right? It's just more difficult when you're doing a virtual offsite to get away from those daily non-work responsibilities. Time zones. It's probably the biggest one of doing a virtual offsite, is that you have to actually deal with time zones. And maintaining someone's focus when they're in front of a screen and therefore just have way more distractions than they would if they were in person. So today we'll cover ideas that span both virtual and in-person offsites, and different components to think about when you're planning different kinds of offsites, as well as alternatives between virtual and in-person experiences that cover the same overarching topics. Here's the key point though. When thinking about the differences between a virtual offsite and an in-person one, the key is not to try to recreate an in-person experience as a virtual one, but instead to think about what opportunities are available to you because you are virtual, because you're remote, as well as ultimately what you're trying to accomplish and how you can accomplish those same goals, but with a different approach. So today we're going to talk about 3 key parts of planning an offsite: goals, logistics, and what I call the special sauce. So first, let's talk about goals. As with most things, knowing why you want to do something is very important. What does your team or your department need right now? What does your peer group need? Right? An offsite can be any number of folks, and there's huge differences between planning an offsite for, let's say, a peer team of like 3 people versus planning a company-wide offsite. An offsite can also have more than one goal, and most of them do, especially these days. You can't usually just fly everyone together just to hang out, and even if you can, I'd push you to think about creating a purpose that's beyond that, or that really digs into why you want or need everyone to hang out together. Maybe the goal is to walk away with a team vision and to have folks get to know each other better. Maybe the goal is to share roadmaps with other departments and recognize where there are dependencies or where work needs to be done together to be truly successful. Maybe the goal is to ensure that everyone understands and can provide feedback on a roadmap for the upcoming year. Maybe it's all of the above. The structure of your offsite will depend on what the goals are and how many goals there are. Now keep in mind, you likely won't be able to do everything that you want to do. For example, right, it would be super fun to do a mini hackathon, make sure folks get to know each other, establish critical ground-up buy-in around maybe some team culture, brainstorm, determine, and review a roadmap for the upcoming year, align with the broader company goals, have fun, do some team knowledge sharing, and also have everything paced in a way that allows everyone to focus on each of these things and areas. But that would take multiple weeks, not just an offsite in either a day or a few days. You can weed out priorities and goals by thinking about what you can do asynchronously, right? What can be done in an hour-long team meeting or a series of team meetings over the course of a few weeks. And determine top priorities by thinking really critically about what everyone needs to do together in person and what they need the time and space away from their day-to-day responsibilities to really dig into. Like, what are those issues that you need to be in a different space, in a different brain space, with a different pace for the day? A critical part of an offsite, right, is the fact that you take your brain to a different space. It's similar to how many of us probably take a walk when we're trying to think through something big or challenging, or when that moment that you stop working on something and you give yourself that space away from it, right? That's when you sometimes get your best idea of how to solve it. You mentally prepare for an offsite in a different way than you do your day-to-day work. So it can be helpful to figure out what your folks can think about while having those regular distractions versus what they really need to be in a different headspace to move forward with. So what are you trying to accomplish? How long can your offsite be, right? How often do you have offsites? So that's a bit of like what happens now versus what can happen in the future if you're doing more frequent offsites. And how can you fit in the top things that you would like to accomplish? Based on these goals, you can also do some advanced thinking about who will be doing the follow-ups or the action items. Is it you? Is it engineering managers? Is it volunteers that you need to remember to make sure to ask for at the end of every session or at your end of the day action item recap? Depending on the goals of the offsite, you'll likely have a good sense of generally which group is likely to do a majority of the follow-up tasks, and making sure that that group actually has the bandwidth to accomplish those steps soon is also really helpful in determining goals, right? Like, you don't want to do a ton of work and have a whole offsite around an area that then nobody who is going to take those action items actually has time to accomplish for a number of months. You want to use those offsite outcomes to springboard some of these critical things that you'll be tackling. It's a helpful way to prioritize what you maybe want to do or focus on for your offsite when you're trying to pare down a bunch of different goals and ideas. So next is logistics. Logistics seems boring, and it might seem really silly to dedicate a whole section of this talk to logistics, but you would be surprised at the tremendous effect that having smooth logistics has on individuals attending an offsite. Logistics are all of those little things that people have to think about. It's the things that take up those small bits of mental energy and capacity. For those of you who are familiar with the concept of mental load, you know the concept of mental load, I see some nods. They're these small unintended consequences of a million little thoughts and decisions that add up when there are enough of them. These days, it is even more important to make the logistics portion of an offsite as easy as possible, because folks are already exhausted from the hundreds of small decisions they're making every day. From regular normal things to the increased burden of decision making. Pandemic is still factoring into each of our lives in various ways, and it comes up especially when you're traveling to things or doing group get-togethers. And so you want to make it as easy as possible for folks to show up to the offsite ready to go. So in advance, set the stage. Make sure that folks know what to expect. They should be aware of the goals, the agenda, the timing of everything, when there will be breaks and when there'll be longer sessions, any links to virtual platforms that they might need. Because I'm usually accommodating a number of time zones for virtual offsites, one thing that I've found successful is planning sort of core hours and then time zone friendly sessions, where in the time zone friendly sessions, we'll often repeat similar content or material, but at different time zones so that folks can attend the one that works the best with their work schedule. I will also make a special note on the agenda of when we're trying to power through meal times, or when we might push to finish a session that will result in a late lunch for a specific time zone. So I'll say and repeat multiple times something explicitly like, US East Coasters, make sure that you have a snack handy because we're not going to break for lunch until 1:30. Something like that specifically draws that attention to that time zone. It allows folks to be caffeinated, prepared, and focus on the session at hand, as opposed to wondering when is my next break? Should I go now? Should I stay? And have something to munch on. Good snacks are always good. If you're planning an in-person offsite, you can collect airlines and arrival and departure times for your team and put them in the same doc or issue where you have the agenda and other information so that folks can potentially share rides to and from the venue. In person, I also usually include a suggested packing list or a note about what the weather might be, right? All of these little things that make it just a tiny bit easier. So thinking through the logistics is also a great way to get folks into the offsite mindset. So for virtual offsites, I still have what I call travel days on Monday and Friday, let's say, if the offsite is Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. When you are traveling to an offsite in person, just that act of traveling gets you into a different mindset. You're physically going somewhere, you're likely thinking about what are the next few days gonna hold? What should I expect? For a virtual offsite, I encourage folks to use their Monday travel day to wrap up anything that feels like a loose end so that they're not distracted by it for the rest of the week. To do something that helps them feel like they're entering an offsite mindset. Go for a bike ride, go for a walk, etc. I often put together a practice tutorial for whatever virtual whiteboard or tools we're using so that they have some tasks and some stuff to sort of mess around with, so they're not learning that as we're starting a session. And to take time to read any sort of like offsite, pre-read material, recommended reading, etc. Whether an offsite is in person or virtual, it takes a different sort of energy, especially these days, to participate. And so Fridays, I encourage folks to take that time to process the last few days, to fill out the post-offsite survey, to have casual chats and virtual coffees with folks that they met throughout the week, or that they maybe weren't in a small group with, or didn't have a time to connect with as much, and to continue maybe conversations that they started throughout the week that they didn't have a chance to finish. Finally, a sort of silent but important part of logistics is ensuring that everybody else knows that these folks will be largely unavailable for the week. So this usually involves a few key emails, some Slack channel statuses, and other ways to let folks outside of the department know that we won't be responding, or we'll be slow to respond for the week. Creating that space and making sure that it's visible to the team helps the team also feel like they don't have to answer DMs, they don't have to jump into things that they're pinged about over the course of the offsite, and really helps sort of widely manage expectations. So at the end of thinking through offsite logistics, you want to make sure that attendees know exactly what to expect in terms of both content and general flow, that peer teams and others at the company who might depend on your team know that you'll be away engaging in offsite work, that offsite attendees have, that offsite attendees have a variety of opportunities to make sure that they're really ready to participate in the week or days. So finally, for offsites to be memorable and impactful, they've got to have a little bit of that special sauce or sparkle. So beyond taking the time from the day-to-day and putting yourself in a different mindset, it's important to make offsites feel special and fun, adding a little bit of whimsy to whatever you're doing. So this special sauce can take a variety of forms, right? It doesn't have to be expensive. It just needs to be thoughtful. So today I'm going to talk about top ones that I incorporate into things, which are gifts, experiences, and facilitation. So first, gifts. For virtual offsites, I never like to assume that everybody has all the materials that they need for an offsite. Like me, I have Post-its, I have whiteboards, I have whiteboard markers, I have notebooks. I love office supplies. They're my favorite, but not everyone does. It's maybe not a normal thing. So first and foremost, I make sure that an individual's gift box includes any materials that they might need for the week. Beyond supplies, I have a little bit of a formula that I follow because it provides the basic components of the things that I want everyone to have during the offsite. A little bit of fun, a new way of looking at a leadership lesson of some sort, some sustenance, and something that allows us to bond and use a different part of our brain. So here are some examples of what I've done that fits into those categories. So for fun, I've sent a whiteboard headband, which also doubles as a way to get small whiteboards as an office supply into people's hands. And they were used hilariously throughout the offsite. Many of us frequently read leadership books or books about management and communication. And I found that the core of many of these lessons can also be found in children's books, framed in a way that's just really approachable and short and beautiful. So I like to send a children's book. I personally always pick a children's book with a character of color as the main character. I'm not sure a lot of folks notice that, but for me, it's a tiny way to incorporate and normalize the importance of recognizing people from a whole diversity of backgrounds. And I will often take an excerpt from the book or a core concept, and I'll weave that into my opening and sometimes my closing as I'm sort of framing up and closing the offsite. Recently, I've provided an arts and crafts kit, which is a ridiculous amount of fun, and provides lots of opportunities to do just super chill craft time or fun activities, one of which I will talk about a little bit later. This is also a huge win for folks who have kids. If they need to spend extra hours, they have some crafts to sort of keep kids busy or after the offsite week to use. And then finally, a snack. So I've gotten everyone a snack from a vendor on Etsy before, or given folks a few options and sent them their snack preference. So it's small, but it's thoughtful. And if the snacks are interesting, there are a lot of interesting snacks out there. If the snacks are interesting, they can be a great conversation starter. And sometimes if budget allows it, I'll get some sort of department or team branded swag. Fun, unnecessary, depends on your budget. In addition to the boxes, which again, not including the swag, they're often less than $50 a person. I'll frequently have folks expense a few meals throughout the week. Again, not necessary, but are really nice to have if your budget allows for it. And to push the usefulness and fun of these gift boxes one extra step, when I ship the boxes, I put the person's name and the company name. I ask folks to keep these boxes to the side until the Monday of our offsite. And then on the Monday travel day, we have unboxing parties where I encourage folks to like spin up a Zoom or, so that others can hop in and they'll open up their boxes together, check out what's inside. Again, creating these small ways for folks to connect with one another. It gets a little more complicated when you're dealing with multiple countries, but it honestly isn't too bad. And I think at the end of the day, it's usually well worth it. So next, we're going to talk about experiences. So almost every in-person offsite involves some sort of team experience, whether it's volunteering, going to a baseball game, heading to a delicious, more special dinner. One time I did a metal smithing workshop, which was a lot of fun. And virtually, these experiences are a little more difficult to find, but there are some really fantastic ones out there. I've done a bunch of Airbnb virtual experiences, tons of different budget price points, tons of different options, companies that will send out kits to everyone in advance, companies that you don't need much for an interactive session. We've done ones from like fun drawing exercises that also focus on communication, to chocolate making, to sandwich making. You can have folks expense any materials that they need up to a certain amount. And all these places offer private sessions and discounts. Experiences, virtually or in person, are frequently what lead to those inside jokes, to that banter, and to that just like increased camaraderie between folks. And again, you can find a variety of experiences at a huge number of price points. So finally, the most important piece of that special sauce is really focusing on engaging and interesting sessions through thoughtful facilitation. So this is the most difficult part of an offsite, but if your entire offsite is filled with just frontal presentations where people are sitting and consuming information without interacting with it, I can almost promise you that it will be in one ear and out the other. And this is even more true for virtual offsites where you're also competing with 1,000 other things for people's attention. So what does a thoughtful and engaging session mean? It means that folks are participating in conversation. It means that depending on the size of the group, breakout rooms might be used. I highly recommend using interactive tools like Mural, Miro, FigJam, Post-it noting, postcards, etc. So I have a few examples that I will go through, both focused around having a conversation about communication, one example from in-person and one example from virtual. So in person, this is the balloon building exercise. Has anyone done the balloon building game before? No, okay. So the balloon building game takes many forms. The idea is to build the tallest, most cost-effective tower using balloons and tape in some set amount of time. So there are lots of variations of this. Some include that it has to be freestanding. Sometimes the balloons are blown up in advance. Sometimes they aren't. You can do the same concept with like toothpicks and marshmallows, or a variety of other materials. I split my group up into 3 groups of about, I think it was 6 or 7 in each group. And they had 15 minutes. They had 5 minutes for planning, where they had to pick a team leader and sort of discuss how they wanted to build their tower. And then they had 10 minutes to build. Now, here's the tricky part. After a few minutes, I threw in some curveballs as the facilitator. So the first one was that the team could no longer verbally communicate, right? Slack was down. The second one, after another few minutes, was a reorg, where they could talk again, but 2 people from the team had to switch and they had to go to the team to their right. I think there was a third curveball, which like now that I recap, it feels a little mean, but I can't remember what the third curveball was. At the end, there's a scoring system where you can add up materials used, height of the tower, et cetera, to determine like who wins. but really the most important part is the discussion that you have afterwards. So we talked about like which parts of that exercise were most difficult. When you got reorged with one teammate and had to join a new team, how did that feel? How did the team welcome you into that group, if they did at all? Or were they just focused on getting the tower built? It leads to some really great realizations about how we communicate by ourselves and with our teams when we're accomplishing goals. The second example is one that I did virtually. So I broke folks up into groups of 3, and each group had a builder, an architect, and a guide. Everyone took out their craft kits, remember the ones that I sent in the boxes, and I put architects each in their own breakout room. They had 5 minutes to build a small craft using only their crafting materials, and they didn't know what it was going to be used for. Then the guide was let into the breakout room with the architect. They had 5 minutes to show the craft. The architect could not explain it, they could only show it. They were also allowed to take pictures and send it on Slack just to the guide. And then the architect took the craft out of the video frame and the builder was let into that breakout room. Groups had 5 minutes to get the builder to build the craft that the architect created. And then also the guides and the architects couldn't talk at the same time, so they had to figure out how to like make sure they were taking turns talking. I think I might have thrown a curveball in there, or you can also throw curveballs in, but that is like difficult enough just with those instructions. And then we came back and we talked about it, right? So each group revealed the architect's build and the builder's build, which is sort of the picture that you can see. And we had a conversation like, what was more difficult than anticipated? What was easier? What would have been easier to do this in person? There were lots of conversations about how complicated the thing that the architect chose to build was, which has some really fun parallels into software development, right? It was just a really fun, fantastic conversation. For other sessions, I've done lots of like post-itting individually, broken folks up into small groups, brought them back into big groups. Those are especially good for talking about like OKRs, roadmaps, brainstorms, etc. And even though I'm the one putting on the offsite, I'm not the only person facilitating these sessions and coming up with these sessions, because it's really important you have a variety of voices and perspectives throughout the offsite. So there's some great resources here. There's Luma Institute, which has cards, books, workshops, etc. There are executive certificates for facilitation, great blog posts, articles, etc. Planning an offsite is challenging, and at most companies, while most people get some sort of logistical support, putting together the actual offsite agenda content is often the responsibility of the person leading the offsite, and nothing comes off of your plate, but planning this meaningful, productive, effective, multi-purpose event is just added to your to-do list. So I can help you figure out what your team needs at an offsite or what the content that offsite could be by helping you plan, providing one-on-one facilitation tips, writing content for the virtual or in-person gathering, doing an engineering team health check to sort of help you figure out maybe what your team might need the most, or again, being a part-time VP of engineering if your company needs to fill that gap. So come and chat with me about any of those things. Okay, so what have we learned today? We've learned about goals and knowing exactly what you want an offsite to accomplish based on who's participating and what the key problems are. We've learned about logistics and making it as easy as possible for people to just be able to show up and engage. And we've learned about the special sauce, right? Thinking through what items you provide, what experiences you provide, and what content you provide. Okay, I promised one more interaction. We're gonna do it super quickly because we're a minute over. So you have note cards on your chair, or hopefully most of you do, on your chair or around you. I would love for you to pull those out and write one thing that you wanna talk about or accomplish at your next offsite. You'll be sharing these in a minute. Let me give you 10 seconds to do this. One thing you wanna talk about or accomplish at your next offsite to share. All right, I want you to hold up your cards, walk around, and find 2 other people who have written something similar to you and discuss. I'm gonna give you like 2 minutes to do this, and then we're going to wrap up. All right. If you didn't have a chance to discuss, find those people later in the conference and discuss with them then. So now some homework. As you go through your next week at work, think about the meetings that you're sitting in or the ones that you're leading, right? What could be solved through a really effective offsite? Which meetings do you stay more tuned in for, and which do you sort of tune out or you watch others tuning out? This can help you think about what you want to do at your next offsite and really help frame those goals. That's it. Thank you.